will be looking at navigating the NFTs in the virtual world or digital spaces, also called the metaverse, with our session titled Non-Fungible Tokens Must Know Legalities. To make this discussion possible, on our distinguished panel, we have with us Mr. L. Badri Narayanan, Executive Partner, Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan, Mr. Tarun Jain, Partner, BMR Legal, Ms. Stella Joseph, Partner, Economic Laws Practice, Mr. Vinod Joseph, Partner, Arcus Partners, and Mr. Subhash Bhatoria, Partner, LNL Partners. I am your host, Ashima Ori, Managing Editor of BW Legal World, who has the honor of moderating this August session. Experts, once again, a very warm welcome to all of you and to our audiences joining us across various platforms. So let's dive right into the conversation with our panelists. Panelists, let's start with some opening thoughts on the roaring popularity of NFTs and some of your top concerns from a legal perspective. We'll start with Badri. Badri, your thoughts, please.
Hey, thanks, Ashima, and a warm good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I think, like you said, NFTs caught the imagination of the people, though it's come, it's been new from a conceptual point of view. And I think it's fascinating both from an economic, digital point of view, but also from a legal point of view, because it kind of challenges so many of the well-understood legal norms that we've always taken for granted at some level, right? So I think that's really the core of what this NFT represents, an ability for us to be able to own a digital asset on an internet which was considered to be a community, effectively speaking, right? So it's common property, and you're trying to find a way of being able to come up with private property on top of the internet, and all of it being done using technologies where there is no person owning or being able to have. So for me, NFTs is great, and I think it's a really good place. I will just highlight two big concerns from a legal perspective that I thought we should look at. One is, I think NFT as a concept is going to have issues from an enforcement point of view. I think enforcement is going to be an issue because our traditional laws are not oriented towards being able to handle enforcement and issues from a NFT kind of a perspective. That's one big area which is going to be something that NFTs will have to kind of go through. And as I think panelists will talk a little bit about some of the issues that as lawyers we grapple with when we look at NFT. Another one I feel is that the close association between NFT and crypto and the impact that crypto will have on NFTs, because many times you can't just go purchase NFTs. You have to buy a crypto to be able to purchase an NFT. Okay, many times NFTs can mimic cryptocurrencies. They are fungible in nature, obviously, but that association between the two can have impact. Even, for example, from a tax perspective, the government is looking at cryptocurrency but wants to keep the door open for NFTs because, again, it's something that they want to bring into this area. So those are the two big areas which I thought are concerns for NFT: the enforcement regime and the portions relating to its close association with cryptocurrency and the impact that cryptocurrency regulations will have on NFT. So those are my opening thoughts, Ashima.
Thank you, Badri. Thank you so much. Vinod, coming to you, your thoughts, and would you agree with Badri?
Yeah. So the thoughts which come to my mind initially are, one, should NFTs be regulated at all? And if they are to be regulated, should any of our existing regulators like the RBI or SEBI be asked to take on the role? They're not really securities. Or should you create a new regulator just for NFTs? And then the bigger concern is, if just because you have a regulator doesn't mean you are going to be able to protect investors from the ultimate pitfalls. I mean, if it turns out to be a bubble and things crash, a regulator will just stand by and watch. So having a regulator doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make things any easier, unless the regulation is very harsh, where you say, you create a database, every owner is registered, which takes the joy out of NFTs and cryptos, because the whole idea is, not give away too much details, to have some anonymity, to have some fun. So if you bring in a regulator with very harsh regulations, the joy goes out of it. So the whole point of NFTs goes away. So should you have a regulator? And if yes, a new regulator, and how much should it be regulated? Then, of course, questions like, can you call it a security? Under current law, I don't think it is a security. But then I just read a report saying that the New York Stock Exchange has filed a trademark application, which is sort of a prelude to allowing NFTs to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So now if NFTs are allowed to be listed on recognized exchanges, they could become securities, which is downright scary. But those are the initial thoughts which come to my mind.
Great.
It's an exciting world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vinod. Stella, coming to you, your thoughts.
Thanks, Ashima, and thanks for inviting me to this panel. So, NFTs from the consumer law perspective also raises certain important, perspectives in terms of consumer protection, because, like we know, NFT has a very strong retail consumer interface. A lot of the consumers, actually do not really fully understand the technology and take it as a speculation and as a just a fad and follow it through. So there is a very important concern as regards protection of consumers, especially retail consumers. And frankly speaking, the legal framework in relation to consumer protection is not fully clear to clearly cover their rights. There's a lot of ambiguities in terms of the existing Consumer Protection Act and the e-commerce rules when it comes to protecting consumer rights. So I would see that there are a lot of concerns and ambiguities existing in terms of consumer protection as well.
Right. Thanks, Stella. Subhash, coming to you, what are your thoughts on how NFTs are faring?
Thank you, Ashima. Well, NFT, as we understand, is, in a layman's term, it is a lock and key which is attached to a property. And the biggest issue, what I perceive, is with regard to the ownership. I see that, be it digital art, be it any digital form of a tangible art, when NFT is traded and there is some sort of change of hands, the ownership requirement would still be in question. Also, it will lead to a lot of counterfeiting. We are anyway seeing the Meta Perkins issue, which is a very clear overlap of copyrights vis-a-vis trademarks, vis-a-vis proprietary rights. So all these issues would arise, certainly, especially if you look at NFT as the trading currency of metaverse. In metaverse perspective, then it becomes a larger issue of property and ownership.
Thanks, Subhash. Tarun, it's always my, I enjoy coming to you last, so you can summarize for us, how you agree or disagree with others, and also add your thoughts to it.
Thanks, Ashima. It's always good to, be on your panel. The advantage and disadvantage of coming last is that most of the points have been spoken up, so you get to have a kind of a concluding voice. But then the challenge is always to be innovative and be able to bring something new. So let me try to add on to the common theme which all the panelists have spoken so far. And I think it's a categorical statement which with very little doubts over it. If we speak of India, currently there is no regulatory architecture for NFTs, and there is no doubt about it. Recently, the finance minister has announced some changes regarding tax, and we'll cover it during the session more. But the fact remains that there is no architecture. Now, the consequences of it are manifold. First is that the entire understanding of NFT today is based on its technical attributes. It's not based on reading of a law. Second, the technical attributes are not static. Even the industry is getting on with it. It's just the starting point. So these are constantly evolving and they are changing very dynamically overnight, in fact, if I may not be over exaggerating this. Now, what follows from this is that, just like every other development which law has to cope up, we as lawyers first have to find our feet within the existing regulatory and legal paradigm. So let me give you some comparables. Today, we have a very settled competition law. But do we know what was the situation before the competition law or the Competition Act was enacted? We were looking for common law remedies, tortious remedies, civil suits, etc., etc. So we were looking for the existing regulatory paradigm to address the challenges of the evolving technology. Same thing was with bankruptcy. Today IBC is like a kind of a showstopper. But do we know what was the legal position before the IBC code was enacted? Now, same situation applies to NFT. I know maybe these are crude analogies, but the situation is that we as lawyers are trying to find our feet within the existing paradigm of IPR laws, consumer laws, company law, securities laws, and obviously taxation laws. So there is a constant challenge from a legal perspective, and the challenge is, in fact, more than the industry. The industry does not care about the law. It only cares about evolving. but the lawyers have to take hold of how the industry is moving, and also to ensure that the challenges which come up because of lack of regulation, they are addressed. So according to me, this is a very live topic, and we will have to constantly revisit our understanding as and more the industry evolves.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you so much for those thoughts. Thank you, panel, for giving us your opening remarks, and that leaves us with the thought that it's currently such a maze, which we'll have to kind of undo right now with all of you. Vinod, starting with you, could you simplify what NFTs are for us? If we had to explain it to a kid or a child, how would we tell them what NFTs are?
Well, an NFT is simply data added to a file that creates a unique signature. So it could be a image file, a song, tweet, or it could be, say, some physical item. It could even be a physical item or some other digital format. So, someone can own a digital file, but it's marked with code to differentiate it from any digital replicas. So you would to create an NFT, you would essentially have to go to someone like Binance or any of those NFT marketplaces or OpenSea or any of those marketplaces. You would also need to have a wallet with some cryptos in it. Usually, you create your own digital art, and then you can convert that into NFT and sell it to whoever wants to buy it. Of course, you lose control over it. It's also possible to have a NFT over your physical asset. So you have a real piece of art, which you could put it in the custody of an issuer, and then that person could issue a NFT, and that could, it depends on the terms of issuance, of course. So the person who buys the NFT could at some point, depends on the terms of issue, could have the right to get hold of the physical art. Even though those are really rare. Usually the standard NFT is connected to digital art. That's how it's meant to be, and it's bought and sold using cryptos. It's actually a very simple concept. You create something digitally and make it unique, and of course the ownership is recorded on a blockchain, and any transfer is recorded on a blockchain, so that you can always make sure that where it's coming from, who the previous owner is, and it can't be stolen, or because it has a unique signature. You can't create a duplicate, even though I'm told that it's possible to create a series of NFTs for digital art, which have minor differences, but I'm not going there now. So that's essentially what an NFT is. Conceptually, it's simple once you get into it.
So in your opening remarks, Vinod, you obviously mentioned that they're not yet put on the bracket of securities. Of course, the marketplace cannot be equated to our exchanges. Now, where would you put NFTs as of now in terms of their value, as once they're traded? What do you call them? Are they derivatives, securities? What are your thoughts?
It's property. It's intangible property. We always had intangible property, or copyright, patent. They're all intangible properties, just as you could sell copyright. Those are traditional intangible property. There was a time when copyright and patent were kind of posh modern concepts, but now they're old. Now the latest intangible property is your NFT. Those are, at the end of the day, they are property. So even if you don't have any new law, and currently they're not illegal, you can apply property law to NFT. So you can, if there's a dispute, ultimately it's property law which will apply. So it's their assets, properties. You could give it a different color with a new law or regulation. You could make it a security with the right regulation, especially if they get listed on a recognized stock exchange. But until that happens, they're just properties, intangible properties.
So how would you say that is India going to make it legal to trade in NFTs? Is it currently legal? It's one of the most asked questions on Google. Are NFTs or trading in NFTs legal in India? How do we define this for our audiences?
This has been further complicated by our honorable finance minister, making that, bringing in the crypto tax on top of everything else. So currently they are legal. So there was a phase around 2 or 3 years when the Reserve Bank had a circular which prevented any entity regulated by the Reserve Bank from providing services to those running crypto exchanges. And that's been struck down by the Supreme Court in March 2020. And ever since then, there's been no restriction under Indian law on either cryptocurrencies or NFT. So currently they are very much legal, but it's quite possible that it could be regulated or even be by a law made illegal. Now, just because it's a tax doesn't per se mean that it's legal, because the point is, again, strictly theoretically speaking, the government is entitled to tax everything. They can even tax money which is the proceeds of crime. You can have the right to tax all sorts of income. I'm sure Badri will be able to explain more about that. He's a tax expert. But the point is, taxation, taxes, just as death and taxes are only certain things. Taxes can fall even on proceeds of crime. The point is, just because the government said there's going to be a tax on crypto doesn't mean it's going to be blessed or given or promoted or anything on that side. Just says that currently, if you have crypto transactions, transfers of crypto, there is a 30% tax. That's about it.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I would say I'm hoping that they won't declare it illegal. And even this 30% tax has the potential of driving it offshore, because you do the transaction there, you pay 30% tax. You do it in an overseas exchange, you may escape. But then if you're an Indian resident, maybe you won't escape. These are all nuanced issues. So the indication seems to be that it won't be made illegal, but I think the government is keeping its cards close to the chest. There was a crypto bill which was being debated, discussed. I don't think I've seen it. I don't think it's been made available to the public. So I think the government is still yet to make a final decision on that. We hear reports occasionally saying the Reserve Bank would definitely like to have it banned. I think even recently I read a report saying the one deputy governor of the Reserve Bank said crypto should be banned, and the Reserve Bank has always indicated its preference. Even the circular was issued 4 years ago that they would like to outright ban it, because they definitely do not want cryptos to be any form of tender, legal tender, or anything which can substitute currency. But currently it's very much legal.
Thank you, Vinod. Bringing Tarun on this. Tarun, of course, crypto and NFT have been brought under the tax net. A huge tax burden, 30%. Is that to dissuade NFTs and crypto? And what is really going on there?
Sure. So before I get into the nuances of tax, just two opening statements or comments on the recent proposal. The first is that it is not specific to NFT. It covers all crypto assets other than official digital currency. They are yet to define what does it mean, but that's what the proposal is. The second is, I echo with Vinod that this proposal to tax is not a statement or affirmation about the moral or legal authority of the crypto trade happening in India. This is just a proposal to tax the crypto assets and the value addition which happens on their transfer, nothing beyond. Now, coming to the tax proposal, I think you have made a fair point regarding the 30% slab. I think there is a question also from the audience on that. But let me tell you what the government is thinking and how it is coming up to this particular tax rate. See, currently we have different tax rates under the Indian income tax law. And the 30% tax rate is generally reserved for speculative businesses or those businesses where you have windfall profits. For example, if you have a lottery income, you have an income from horse racing and betting. This is generally subjected to 30%. Speculative businesses like some businesses relating to derivatives, etc., maybe not officially derivatives, but related kind, they are also subjected to 30%. So the unofficial message from the government is live and clear that we are treating you to be a nebulous area and therefore we will tax you at the highest rate. So this is what the message is. But there is also something which needs to be read in what they have not done. You see, they have not proposed this as a tax on capital gain, which means the proposal is not to treat crypto assets or NFT as assets of an individual. Instead, what they are proposing is that if there is a person who transfers a crypto asset, the value addition on the transfer shall be subjected to 30% tax. So they have created a new species of tax law for crypto asset. They are not treating it unlike any other form. And we have to also contrast it with what other countries are doing. So I gave you an example regarding capital asset. There are a few countries which treat crypto as capital asset. Then there are some countries which do not even require you to transfer the crypto in order to tax it. The very fact that you hold crypto is sufficient for them to tax it. and they do it in the form of wealth tax, etc. So India is saying that we do not mind if you hold crypto, but if you transfer crypto and you get any particular income arising out of it, we will treat 30% of that income as taxable and we will tax it. So this is the broad and overarching scheme of the crypto law. And also one facet, and this is more to do with the fact that crypto should not lead to tax evasion or an informal economy. They've also obliged the seller to ensure that there is a tax deduction at source. So what will happen is that the government will get records, there will be an audit trail, and therefore they will be able to assess that which way the market is flowing and is there a need to change the policy parameters besides obviously collecting the tax.
Right. And so we hear even the losses, coming from the digital assets cannot be offset with other, against other income. So there's this huge, sort of a negative spin on this. What are your thoughts?
Yes, fair point. But as I said, the policy of the government is that this is speculative income. And this point has been officially stated by the finance minister and the revenue secretary. But what they have not stated, and I would just like to add, is the fact that in most NFTs, the cost of acquisition is hardly there. This is a digital asset. The cost of acquisition at the most would be an amount which I pay to buy an NFT. I don't see a huge technical cost for creation of an NFT if I'm not the owner of it or I'm not the creator of it. So that way the government perhaps is working on the premise that if there is no cost which you incur to make an NFT, then you should not be allowed a deduction. And the second point, you are right, there is no set off, no deduction, no allowance, for a simple reason that they intentionally want to tax it at the highest rate. As I said, they want to treat it as a speculative income. So this is a very conscious and intended choice which they have in their system.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tarun. Coming to Subhash, of course, in the fashion and art industry, NFTs have, gone through the roof. We hear of so many examples with Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, writing or voicing Madhushala and putting it out as an NFT. We have Manish Malhotra, putting out his designs. These are some popular examples. Now, what really goes on there and how is this working out in that domain?
So, NFT and blockchain allows digital art to be present on a medium and can be traded through, tokens. In traditional concept terms, these things probably are not protected. Say, for example, if it's a Manish Malhotra design, probably it is not protected as copyright and would have gone beyond 50 number of times and has designed something which is not protected. But through NFT, they can still commercialize those. Amitabh Bachchan's voice, again, it's a performance art. So as we were speaking earlier, also said there are certain art forms which are not well commercialized in traditional concept and brick and mortar, but through NFT, they are finding a route where they can, get some money out of it, create some revenue stream from these designs and these art forms. NFT is giving this avenue, but it is very important to understand here that there is no transfer of rights. There is no intellectual property which is transferred from one hand to other just because there is a trading of NFT. NFT as a blockchain, as an algorithm, it is just associated with her art form. And this, because of this peculiar circumstance or this understanding or the structure of NFT trading, there are a lot of people who are using the same art form and putting their own NFTs, as what Joseph also was explaining, that there are similar NFTs for a single art form. And this is leading to a lot of counterfeiting. Say, for example, I have minted an NFT on a photograph. Now that photograph is out. It is on OpenSea platform. It is on Binance platform, wherever you can see them. You copy them and create your own NFT on it, right? You can mint your own NFT on the same art form. Only the NFT which was originally created on the original art form, that will have a better value. But how do you stop others from minting a similar NFT? How do you stop counterfeiting of NFT? That is also in question. From counterfeiting of product or counterfeiting of or piracy of an original work to piracy of an NFT is something which we have not seen, and this will change the mechanism because that is something which is not part of the existing laws. Also, is an important aspect to understand is that whether NFTs can be derivatives, because as Indian copyright law, if I restrict myself to, is very specific and says if something is not under that law, then it is not protected. So under Indian law, we do not protect derivatives other than sound recording or cinematographic film. So if its NFT is not an original work, it's not considered an original work, which is literary, music, dramatic, or artistic work, then how do you protect it as an IP? So per se, NFT cannot be protected as an IP. But yes, if alongside NFT, if you're also transferring certain copyrights in the digital work, which is associated with the NFT, then a value can be apportioned or can be ascertained to that NFT. That could be one mechanism, because if I compare the NFT, a blockchain platform, to a copyright exchange, what happens in a copyright exchange is that basically you're trading into an IP, which is part of a copyright work, which is traded on that exchange. So if I correlate them, then probably you have a better platform, a more legitimate way of dealing in NFTs in relation to digital artworks.
So Subhash, just to simplify this for a designer or an artist. Now, if I want to mint some sort of art, and make an NFT out of it, what are the things that I should be most careful of?
Well, it depends. If you're a fashion designer and you have created certain designs, now that design for that purpose would be an artwork, and when you're putting that artwork on a platform, it will be kept as a painting. Say, for example, it will be a sketch, right? It will not be traded as an apparel. Mm-hmm. So, say if I take an example from a metaverse store, a store which is created in metaverse, and say a Gucci store or a Hermes store, and they have placed their design as apparels which can be worn by avatars, then that can be one of the ways in which fashion designers can use NFT or blockchain. So they can place their designs as apparels for avatars, and those avatars can buy those apparels through NFTs. They can do that kind of arrangement. But that is way forward. I think Facebook is still working on it, and for another couple of years they would be creating their metaverse. Until then, if you are, as a fashion designer, if you're putting your sketches online, one of the things you would be facing is that you will be publishing your sketches. So people would anyways, left, right, center, they would copy. And as Indian law stands, if anything is prepared or produced more than 50 number of times, it loses its copyright protection as well. So you need to be little cautious of what you're placing on NFT platform, on blockchain platform for NFT trading, especially in case of, say, photographers. You generally, the seasoned photographers would have their photographs in editions. So it will be an edition of 10 or 20 or 50. Mm-hmm. When you place those edition photographs, those limited edition photographs on NFT, there is a major risk of piracy, of copying, which will be very difficult to stop. So especially your work, which is in limited editions, I think at least for this moment, you should keep it away from these platforms.
Right. Tip there, Subhash. And I'll come back to you on knowing more about how, if there is an infringement there, we deal with that in the current scenario. Before that, coming to Stella. Stella, in this scenario now, as a consumer, what are my rights if there is any, we've heard our other panelists, and in that, taking that into account, what are your views on the kind of challenges that a consumer would face?
Sure. So let me start with, setting down the framework. So obviously in India, there's a Consumer Protection Act of 2019, and the e-commerce rules which have been notified in 2020 under the Consumer Protection Act. The Consumer Protection Act of 2019 itself, replaced 3 decades old legislation primarily, and one of the ideas to do that was to kind of cater to new technologies like e-commerce, etc. But certainly, in 2019, the legislation does not specifically cater to a technology such as the NFT and various nuances to it. And therefore, if one kind of reads the legislation, it broadly covers a consumer who is someone who uses goods or services for personal consumption and pays consideration for it. So again, what is goods? What is service? Goods is defined broadly as any movable property. Service is also defined broadly as anything which is used, as a service. It's very generically defined. And of course, what is the classification of NFT itself is a problem which everyone is grappling with, especially in the tax area. And now under the Indirect and the Income Tax Act, obviously there is a specific demarcation, but the confusion as regards whether it's goods or service exists even under the GST regime. So okay, if one were to go ahead and say that, okay, yes, the philosophy is that consumer protection legislation should be read in a very broad manner to ensure protection of consumer rights. If one adopts that philosophy and reads it in a broad manner to even include something like an NFT, which is like the other panelists explained, it's essentially like a ownership certificate for the underlying product, whether it's a digital asset or a physical asset. So it's just a ownership certificate which is existing on the blockchain. So even if someone was to read it in such wide manner and say that yes, you would qualify as consumer, there are other challenges. So how does your rights as consumers get enforced under the Act? So obviously for individual retailer, it's very difficult to practically go through the recourse of challenging it before the district, state, or national bodies. So practically there is a facility where you can call up the National Helpline Grievances, and the CCPA, which is the Central Consumer Protection Authority, which has been recently been set up. That possibly is an avenue, because CCPA has a lot of powers in terms of taking suo motu actions. So in the past, we have in fact seen that last year it has issued more than 200 notices to e-commerce platforms and as regards enforcing e-commerce provisions, and they were not displaying certain aspects. So the CCPA could be an authority which could kind of really take suo motu actions against possibly an NFT marketplace. But all of that is speculation. Obviously, one will have to wait and watch. And the other challenge I feel would come in a situation where the NFT auction site is outside India, and which typically happens because there's a lot of confusion in the Indian regime, and therefore a lot of marketplaces kind of decide to set up the platform outside India until the time there is legal certainty in India. So if you kind of buy from an NFT platform which is located outside India, and then how would the consumer laws have an extraterritorial application, and how can you enforce your rights under the Indian consumer laws? There again, one will have to kind of sit and interpret the provisions, because if one evaluates the e-commerce rules, there is a specific rule there which says that it even extends to e-commerce entities which do not have a presence in India, but systematically cater goods and services to consumers in India. So that is one provision which possibly someone can kind of evaluate and therefore seek to apply the consumer laws and e-commerce rules to a marketplace which is located outside India. I feel that if there is no legal certainty as regards classifying it as goods or service or securities, and if and especially NFT, which I believe is different from cryptocurrency. So you may have a banning regulation or regulating regulation for cryptocurrencies, because someone would view that as something which is undermining the other currencies in India. But as opposed to that, an NFT is like someone mentioned, it's non-fungible. It's not like a currency. It's actually a bragging right, so to speak, and generally it should be allowed and permitted. So, but as what? So if suppose there are no clear regulations around it, then possibly consumer laws could be an avenue where the government may want to enforce and go hard on NFT marketplaces, which is what we've seen in terms of e-commerce players and the e-commerce rules. And even in last year, when the draft e-commerce amendment rules were put up, there were a lot of attempts to kind of have a very overarching reach for the e-commerce rules, because it would cover aspects which typically get covered under your Competition Act or your FEMA Act, and the press note too. So it had that ambition, and it had concepts like fallback liability and concepts like mis-selling, where the very onerous obligations were cast on the e-commerce platform in terms of even where there is no fault of it, it's made liable in case of a fallback liability concept. So you've seen that there are ambitions to kind of make these marketplaces liable under these legislations, and of course that's a draft stage, and now it's under review, and we are expecting a revised draft. But there is ambition there to make the e-commerce rules kind of be very potent, and I would think that possibly that is one route in which these marketplaces may be regulated for the interest of consumer protection. So even in terms of jurisprudence, we have seen that Supreme Court has endorsed the effects doctrine, where something which has an effect in India, even if there is no specific extraterritorial application, even in that case, the courts have kind of felt that the regulators here have the authority to kind of enforce against you and a foreign marketplace. So I think that obviously there's a lot of clarity that is required. Like I said, the existing rules do not specifically cover this technology for sure. So but it also gives some sort of a base on which the authorities may possibly kind of go ahead. So from consumers' point of view, yes, it could be one avenue where the consumers' rights are kind of protected.
Right. Thank you, Stella. Quite informative. Badri, coming to you in following on what Stella said, all of this is also governed by smart contracts, in the absence of a regulation. Now, how do smart contracts work? And I also, while I was reading up on it, understood that there is some sort of a debate on what is consideration for NFTs when we're looking at a valid smart contract.
I'll talk about it, and it's like I said, it's really interesting because the and this crypto space is definitely changing things, because it's kind of making certain things more transparent, and it allows for things like smart contracts to operate. So I'll first talk a little bit about the smart contract, and I'll probably come back a little bit to the discussion that you had till now. So I'll first talk about what's a smart contract. So smart contract is basically a contract which is going to mimic if-then-else statements in the legal document. So what does it mean? So it basically says that if an NFT is sold from Stella to Badri, and let us say Subhash was the original creator of it, and say Subhash sold it for $100 to Stella, and Badri buys it for $1,000. The smart contract basically will be an if-then-else statement in it, which basically will record the fact that the sale has happened. It will also say that, for example, Subhash puts a condition of smart contract. If Stella were to sell this to Badri for a price higher than 100, I will get 1% of whatever is the differential that she has sold it for. So on this, on a $900, he will get a 1%, which will be like $9. So that's the way in which the smart contract will ensure that the original authors will continue to benefit from this is one example of how the smart contract in practice works when it is integrated into NFT. So NFT allows you to be able to basically say that who's the owner, the title, and then once you have the title, how the title, when it is transferred beyond the original person, how the contract should work. So basically it's a very interesting way in which a contract basically provides for that. So what's the issue for this? The issue tends to be that when you said, you very nicely put, what's a consideration for this? Because whenever we talk about contracts, we talk about offer and acceptance, a consideration for a promise, and so on and so forth. But these are not structured in that manner. So these are almost like payments being made for certain things being concluded. So there's no privity of contract between Subhash and me. Payment is being made as a condition of a contract that has been entered between Stella and Subhash. So it gets complicated from that perspective. Who's providing consideration, or are these to be treated as deeds? And there are conditions of deed, and these deeds are required to be fulfilled. So some of these will be there. There's also an issue of stamp duty. There's also an issue of whether these are oral contracts which have been put down in this form, or are they actually written contracts? And as you know, copyright law requires you to reduce transfer of titles in writing. So I think there are some confusion with respect to consideration and enforceability. Like I said, one of the key things in my opening statement was enforceability of these NFTs beyond record keeping. So I think this fundamentally shows that. But what it does is that in the internet community, okay, the way the law works, I feel, is a little different. It's more oriented towards how some things are done rather than the legal nature underlying it. So, for example, a payment comes, immediately the payment will go. So, when I pay $1,000 to Stella, she'll only get $991, okay, and 9 rupees will immediately go. So then Stella has to effectively go and say, no, I need that, and then that contract between Stella and Subhash gets kind of opened up. So there are issues because the smart contracts are able to do that. So you can have fairly complex if then else statements in the contract for the purpose of doing so. That's how the smart contract, in a very, very primitive way, operates. And I think we need lawyers with a lot of creativity to be able to now do more complex smart contracts going forward. I just wanted to, so this is a part of one smart. I just want to add a couple of points. I thought we should, because this entire area is a spectrum. And the way I see it is, the way you look at this space is you split it into 3 parts. You have the blockchain part, you have the NFT part, and then you have the cryptocurrency part. Okay, what's a blockchain? You have blockchain.gov in India right now. Okay, so various government departments are now saying that we're going to use blockchain technologies to ensure that the record of a person owning, say, a piece of land or something is unique and cannot be forged. Why? Because the decentralized way of keeping records makes it very difficult to go back and change things. So you cannot forge. When you have a central repository, you just have to make one change in the central repository, and the new person basically gets the ownership. In a decentralized, once it reaches a certain level of maturity, it's the processing power required to be able to go back and change all of that is extremely difficult. So it offers a very solid way of being able to keep records. So ultimately, at the core of blockchain, keep record, right? And the other extreme is cryptocurrency, where the blockchain is there for the purpose of being able to keep records, but what is being traded is purely there's no underlying value, but the fact that you have created some kind of a currency, I should say token, I shouldn't use the word some kind of a token where multiple tokens represent the same denomination. So $1, one Bitcoin will be the same as a second Bitcoin of one Bitcoin denomination. So that's how the denominations operate, right? So I own a Bitcoin, you own a Bitcoin, the value of the Bitcoins is fairly the same, okay, regardless of that. So it's a abstraction created on that. It does not have any underlying value, but it based on demand and supply, it kind of goes up and down. So that's the other extreme where the government is very, very worried, because it breaks down 2 things: speculative investments, because of which the consumer is going to be affected, and that it can have an impact on the monetary of the country, because these Bitcoins beyond the country without any detection. And we are a foreign exchange controlled country. Therefore, that becomes extremely important. Now, between these 2 areas is where NFT is situated. And where there's a lot of buzz today is the NFT, which is similar or closer to cryptocurrency, where you kind of put these things on platforms and you purchase and sell. I think that's one area where, again, the issue of speculativeness, while it may not have an impact from a currency perspective, but speculatively, it can have an impact. For example, there can be forgery. You put out something, a value of a tweet, we do not know what it is. It can keep going up and down. But the minute you take up NFTs that are closer to the blockchain, there's a tremendous amount of value. What is the value in that? The value in that is being able to say, I have a title to a particular product. For example, people who write scripts for movies today are able to say, I have a script in the movie, but when I used to take it to the director would keep a copy and then would give it to someone else for the purpose of being able to change certain things. Okay. And many times my scripts were never, or somebody would, when I take it to a director says this is not original, according to me, somebody else has done it already. Yeah. What NFT does in this situation is that, unlike like a legal department of a government, you as an individual can say, I made this script, this is something unique that I've made. I'm going to put an NFT, which is going to be a title. It's almost like a share certificate of a company. That this is a title that is showing that I, the one, has been created. Mm-hmm. And using this title, I can then go to multiple people, typically B2B, sometimes B2C, and say that this is the value that I've got, that I'm able to show you a proof of ownership on the digital world. This is what it is. And if you were to infringe this, okay, I will be in a position to be able to bring action. So the portion relating to that is where I think NFTs over time will have real value, where people who have created interesting work, okay, are able to create an NFT, not necessarily put on a platform for trading, which becomes similar to cryptocurrency, but be able to go on a peer-to-peer basis or be able to say to people that this is how it is to be done. So I think that's where the real value of NFTs over time is going to and then there are, of course, consumer issues, copyright issues, and other issues. But you need to look at NFTs like that. There are really two splits in NFT. NFTs similar to trading, where a whole host of B2C problems, your consumer-related issues, your contract-related issues are there. And there's a whole new world of NFTs which are similar to blockchain, which are more record-keeping.
Yeah.
Title. It's a way of being able to give title warranty to something that you have hitherto before was very difficult to approve. So that is where I feel like the two worlds are going to come. And the problem is that if you try to regulate both these worlds in the same way, you are going to get into trouble. Okay, legally you require different ways of being able to regulate these. So those are my some thoughts with respect to that area.
Right. Thanks for shining light on that, Badri. Quite interesting. Now, a question comes to mind: who subjectively assesses if this is actually not been done before, or this is not something that you're deriving out of somebody else's work, and the credit really lies in the work that you're doing? On the blockchain, how does this pan out?
So blockchain, like you said, I'm just taking this and I'm happy for others to come in. Blockchain, according to me, is a sophisticated record-keeping system. Okay, so it basically will say this is a record of what somebody has come and registered with me. It's like, for example, sale deed hai, I have gone and registered first. It's there on that. But if there's a sale deed which has happened before that, okay, and you're not registered it, two things happen. Legally, it requires registration, in which case you're dead. If legally registration is not required, for example, then you can go on a private dispute between two persons saying that while you said on the blockchain that you're the owner, but I am not dead. Where it gets very interesting is that once I have got it on the blockchain first, okay, and I sell it to someone for value without notice. Effectively speaking, it's like I've sold it, that fellow's come and checked it, he's paid value for it. Then it becomes a fight between two innocent parties. So the one who says, I am the one who has created this, while the other one says that, too bad, I have paid value for this, the Nemo-Dat rule as we call it, and therefore I should be the owner of it. Typically, I think the latter, the second one, the person who's paid value without notice for a consideration, typically of movable property, will take it. In any case, movable property possession is 9/10 title. So once you have that, you're in a good place. So it'll come down to private disputes, I feel. That's how it'll get resolved. And most likely it'll get resolved in favor of the purchaser. This is what I think. I'm happy for others to kind of comment on that.
Right. Great, Badri. I think this would be a great point to have a closing remarks on as well in the interest of time. Coming to you, Vinod, we've also obviously discussed, the treatment of NFTs when it comes to not only India, but globally. Your thoughts on that, if you'd like to add something on the FEMA side, or, alternatively, I'd also invite your remarks on, the discussion we were just having with Badri.
Well, there are overseas, I think, on the whole, I think most, at least in developed countries, they are not banning it. In Singapore, the regulator said they don't want to regulate NFTs as of now. It's possible they may take a look at it later. In most countries, it's not banned. if you are dealing in NFTs while you're based in India, then if you with a credit card, I mean, these days you can make payments overseas. There aren't too many questions being asked. These are, current account, at least small amounts, current account transactions. You don't have too many restrictions. But yeah, there ultimately could be, if the value is really high, then your authorized dealer may have, when it's authorized dealer bank, may have questions, so you may have to fill up forms before you start remitting large amounts of money, or to buy or sell NFTs, or to buy cryptocurrencies or anything of that sort. So there are so many open issues, starting with the intellectual property rights associated with cryptos, the way they can be regulated, whether it's how much support banks should give to support these NFTs. They're all very interesting issues, and right now it's a bit like the Wild West. There aren't too many regulations, and I am not sure whether it's a good idea to start regulating. Because I think from the government's point of view, if they start wading in, regulating, and don't get it right, it looks bad. And frankly, there's no guarantee that they will get it all right. So I on one hand, I respect the government decision to keep a safe distance, and it's not that I have the excellent solution to propose as such. A lot of open issues. At the end of it, it's property. But as Subhash said, just because NFT is being traded doesn't mean the underlying IP has been transferred. So if I create a digital art, I'm the artist, it's definitely mine. I haven't given away my copyright to the person who has the NFT, and I don't think you can really transfer it so easily. I'm not an IP expert, but I don't think it can be transferred easily. So there are a lot of open issues and no easy resolution. Of course, you can always go back to fundamental principles of law and say that this is property, this IP hasn't been transferred. If there's a dispute, yes, you could approach the consumer court. If you get a hearing on time, then yes, this is what the ruling could be, provided you get a hearing and it comes to the final hearing, all of that. So I don't really have easy solutions, but it's an exciting world. We all should be careful. And I think some regulation is required, but I'm very much opposed to any heavy-handed regulation. I would rather, the principle of caveat emptor prevail, and people should be careful, and watch your step and tread carefully.
Absolutely, buyer beware. So, thank you so much for that. Subhash, coming to you, there's also a question which I think you also referred to in the beginning on, you answered that, it seems. 1 second, in the chat section. Sorry, Vinod has answered this, but we'll come to you on this. Could you please discuss your views on the AMAs and the Rothschild case regarding Meta Birkins? I know time is not on our side right now. We need to close the discussion shortly, but if you could, say something about that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting case where there is a overlap of IPs which is leading to conflict. So while initially when Rothschild started with Birkins, it was, sort of an artwork which was, more of a rendition of an interpretation of an art, or interpretation of a product and the intention of the manufacturer. So it was covered as a First Amendment and as a fair proposition. But when Rothschild started commercializing and created many Birkins, Meta Birkins, then Hermes got a little baffled, and they said, why you should be allowed to use my trademark, my trade dress, and commercialize on it. So from copyright, it turned into a trademark issue. So now they are before the court, and this is something which needs to be seen, how the court decide whether it still is a copyright issue or it has turned into a trademark. Now that is something which leads to a very interesting aspect of when you're putting any of your digital, any of your IPs on blockchain for trading through NFT. I would say that you should always protect it, as Hermes did a good job by protecting their Birkin bag design as a trademark. So as fashion designers, if you're putting your sketches on blockchain, you should probably get a design registration done prior hand. So this is, as precaution is better than cure. So these steps that you can take, any of your shape of packaging, any USP design, you can always get it trademarked and not just designed. So it's a strategy that you need to build before you put anything on the platform. That is very much required.
Right, right. So laws of the universe continue to apply on the metaverse. So thanks, Subhash.
It has to.
Right. And there's also a question on what is the success rate of NFT auctions of art for raising donation? Requesting any of the panelists would like to take this. But could we have...
Could you repeat for me again?
Yeah. What is the success rate of NFT auctions of art for raising donation?
It's been quite, I don't know, but I thought it's gone through the roof when it comes to raising of these funds for charity. I was recently reading that, I can't recollect exact this thing. Of course, we know the Jack Dorsey first tweet being put up for charity. I think that becomes a thing. So to that extent, I think some of that is successful because it's less of the NFT, more of the cause, and therefore it tends to be quite successful. It's not just in this kind of stuff. So, for example, plates in dinners, art for this thing. So whenever there's a cause kind of based, the payment is not so much for the NFT, it's for the cause. That NFT just creates an interesting way of being able to do that. Like I said, like Stella put it, bragging rights are there. So I think NFTs for auction will be have been successful, will be successful, and some of those. So again, those are again very interesting for the reason that when you purchase it, it's not so much for the value of the bragging that being able to get it from the auction. It's even more than that. That is one. And second is because the values are high, forgery and other things can be quickly gone up against. So I think those are the advantages of that, and I think auctions for charity of NFTs are there to stay.
Right. Also, bringing in Tarun on this, Tarun, your thoughts on how charitable NFTs can be, and from tax perspective, what would be the treatment there?
Very interesting question, Ashima. In fact, I don't think that the policymakers have gone that far. But what I can gather from the tidbits is that there is a specific amendment which is proposed that if you gift an NFT, or for that matter any crypto asset, even that would be subjected to tax. There are certain excluded categories like gift within related persons or certain specific organizations. I think charitable institutions are one such organization where a gift would be excluded. So building on that, if I own an NFT and gift it to a charitable organization, maybe that will not be subjected to tax. But then, there is a bit of ambiguity on who qualifies as charitable, because in these kind of auctions, even though the objective is charitable, but it's not necessary that the person who is carrying out the auction or the related parties, they may all be regulated and registered entities under the income tax law. So subject to that caveat, yes, the tax law should not fall on a charitable NFT auction, but tax is always subject to fine print. There can be other hierarchies as well. For example, they may, the tax officers may insist that on the precautionary side, you deduct tax and let the person who has suffered the tax, they come and satisfy that, yes, it was indeed charitable and no tax was required to be deducted. You know how tax can snowball into a major issue only for a small bit of non-compliance with the procedural part. So, overall, the things look pretty much green as far as charity and NFTs auction for that purpose is concerned, but subject to certain riders. And I just echo Subhash that it's better to be taking precautions in this because it's a very dynamic and evolving technological aspect. So subject to that, the answer I think is affirmative.
Ashima, I just want to add only one thing to it. And this is something I think, like I said, tax laws are extremely easy to understand in theory, extremely hard to apply in practice. So I'll give you an example. Okay, so we take this example of gift. Okay, I have no answer for it. Yeah. Law says that you must, if you give between non-relatives, it will be deemed to be an income in your hands, and you must pay tax on this gift. No problem at all. Yeah. Okay, take a situation, practical situation. You take Bitcoin. Okay, Bitcoin on one exchange maybe 35 lakhs. Another exchange will be 30 lakhs. Another exchange will 45 lakhs because they're all demand supplies. They're not like one exchange, one certificate only. Okay. What value will you take? Will you take the highest? Will you take the lowest? Take a weighted average? Okay, I buy an NFT. I get Tarun really likes me. He gives, okay. He could not have done a to me because I would have said, boss, you pay $1 and give me. I'll pay you $1. Don't give it to me for free. So I'll be a gift from a non-relative, and then I have to figure out the value for it. Okay, how do I figure the value for an NFT? I have no idea. Do I need to put it on an auction, find out who's the highest bid, and then on that basis pay tax, or do I say that similar NFTs have been sold at this price on which, or I say for Tarun, the fact that he's given the gift to me means it's of no value. Okay, what is the basis for us to be able to figure that value is going to be extremely hard. Okay, and that's where I think the practical aspect of how this tax will be played out is going to be an absolute nightmare for practitioners like us.
Right. Thanks, Badri. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I was disconnected for just a bit in between, but thank you so much for keeping this discussion alive. Stella, coming to you, I'd just like to pick on the GST bit that you mentioned in your time. Would you also give us something on that before we wrap this conversation?
Sure. So, like I mentioned, there are a lot of ambiguities persisting. First one being whether it's goods or services. And the categories of goods or services have certain exclusions for money and securities. So whether they fall in the excluded category or whether they fall in the mainland, that's something that needs to be seen. And that has repercussions on determining your place of supply, that has repercussions on determining your rates. And valuation again is another issue. So these are completely open issues at the moment. And while there are some news reports which mention that there is some indication that they may tax mining as an activity, but one will have to wait and watch. And maybe what is really desired would be to have sort of an aligned approach under the Income Tax Act as well as under the GST to kind of treat it as a particular asset class, whether it's goods, an intangible asset, as Varun mentioned. So the areas of ambiguities are large, and one will have to, of course, what is on a certainty could be the obligation as regards the platform itself. So whatever services that they are kind of rendering, typically that would come within the GST bracket. And that would, of course, there's also another debate that, whether if suppose the marketplace is outside India, then would you view it as simply rendering facilitation services? And if that is just facilitation services, then can you kind of qualify it as an intermediary service? Because the implications of that is different. Then can you kind of take the view that it's outside the GST bracket altogether? And the things get complicated further, as we was mentioning, how smart contracts will come into the picture, that you have a kind of a resale royalty accruing to you. And typically there would also be instances where the artists kind of have a revenue share arrangement with the platform. So it's not like a service fee which is coming, but it's actually like a revenue share. Both of them grow together. So if it's a revenue share, then can you kind of really look at it as a revenue share, or would the tax department kind of look at it as, no, it is ultimately just a facilitation? But because it also hinges on the fact that what is really bringing value. Like Badri mentioned, a large component of it is the technology, because the technology really secures the ownership. And it's the technology, and if the platform is kind of ensuring the technology and bringing the technology in the picture, then would you say that that is kind of really bringing in value, and it's not merely facilitating? So there are a lot of issues surrounding GST as well. And obviously, while right now we have clarity on income tax, but we'll have to really wait and watch for how things span in the GST sphere.
Right. Thank you so much, Stella. Thank you so much, panelists, for joining us with those wonderful insights. I will do this very, very quick round, starting with Tarun. In a yes or no, Tarun, is the future of NFTs bright?
He's looking to collect money, 30%. Obviously, they know that the market is very, very booming.
I think yes. I'm an eternal optimist. So I think whatever said and done, technology will find a way around if they want to tax it too much. But I think NFTs is there to stay.
Great. Stella, your thoughts?
I would echo the thoughts. Yes, I'm also pretty optimistic because with the way it has that intrinsic value and appeal, the bragging right, I don't think that will kind of go away anytime soon. So it's here to stay. Yeah.
Hey, Subhash, your thoughts?
I think the technology is very interesting, and it has its own pros and cons, but it is going to stay as a technology. I'm very positive. I'm not sure how about the currency or the transactions would go forward. But seeing how much Facebook and other Google and other entities are investing in metaverse now, so it is going to change the way we look at the businesses, look at life and civilization per se. So the technology is definitely bringing a change.
Right. Thank you, Subhash. Vinod, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think short term it's definitely bright, or at least definitely very exciting. Long term, I think people will get used to it. I mean, it's just another. I don't want to use the word fad, but I'm not. I don't think that in the long term it's going to be as in the headlines as it is right now. I think people will get used to it. It's there to stay, but I think it's going to fade a little bit, lose its luster a little bit, maybe a bit like Facebook. Now fewer and fewer people are using Facebook, so I think it's going to be a bit like that. So I'm not very optimistic about its long-term prospects. It will be there, but not so exciting so much.
Right. So you feel this is going to plateau at some time.
Definitely.
Great. So good to have all the views, panelists. Thank you so much for joining us. Audiences, if you have any more questions, please write to me at ashram@businessweek.in. Happy to take your questions to our experts. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful.